How's everybody doing?
Good.
Thanks for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. Let me first say that there's nothing that's more important than you giving your time. So thank you for coming out and making time for us. I just want to go briefly into sort of what we've been doing, of course, for the past couple of years, and then I'll just open up and answer any questions you got. Sound good?
Yeah.
So, number one, we said we were going to work on 3 specific things broadly. I mean, I work on all kinds of stuff. The days they're very busy. We have a fantastic team, but the main things are military, veterans, and economy. We try to put things in, try to focus. I know there's a lot of noise out there, lots of noise, but we try to focus on getting things done in those three main issues. However, there are other things as well. When I first got to Congress, I sat down with the Speaker of the House, and he said, "What committees would you like to be on?" I imagine you want to be on House Armed Services because of your background and your district. And I said, "No, sir, I'd like to be on Appropriations." And he very quickly looked at me and said, "No, that's not going to happen. You're a freshman. You're not going to get on freshman on Appropriations." But why is that important? It's important because Virginia has a lot of federal spending in it, right? This economy in this area is roughly 43%, direct federal spending. So it's important. Virginia had an appropriator. This district needed an appropriator, I believe, too. We didn't have any appropriators. So while he said no, I'm very stubborn. And we worked very hard. There's like a 17-member committee that actually decides on what committees that you're going to be on. Leadership has a weighted vote, no question about it. And we systematically met with all of them to basically make our case. And here I am on Appropriations, which is great for this area. It's great for the state. I serve on the subcommittees. I serve on military construction and Veterans Affairs, meeting more over their budgets. Obviously, another huge area here. We'll get more into that in a second. And then I also serve on Homeland Security, so over Department of Homeland Security, Border Patrol, ICE, Coast Guard, and my last one is just the whole operation of Congress that I oversee. Should we come back here, we're setting the conditions to try to be on defense appropriations, which is probably the biggest thing for this area, the most important thing for this area. And it's about half of discretionary spending in the country. So it's a pretty important position that we're shooting for. Now let's talk about each one of those buckets really quickly. Stronger military is something that I campaigned on. That I felt like there was a law, it's called sequestration, that was mandatory cuts to the military. And while that may sound good in some respects because there is fat there, there's no question about it. It was devastating our maintenance, our readiness. So when you take, and I know there are folks in here, veterans in here, when you look at ship maintenance, for example, if you extend that and don't do it, you not only is it cost more in the long run, but you also have a cascading negative effect. It makes the deployment schedule stretched out, which what does that do? It hurts our families and our warfighters. So our readiness maintenance, Oceana Naval Base would be the 7th largest air force in the world if it was a country. They can't get parts. Their pilots are getting about a third of the flight time needed to go on combat operations overseas. That's just unacceptable. And part of that's Congress's fault, quite frankly. And what would happen is you'd have the military who had to cut by law. It'd be the Army, and the Army would come and they'd say, we have 30% over infrastructure. We spend about $500 million a year in empty buildings. We want to cut that. And then Congress, those congressmen and women who say they support the military, they'd say, no, you can't cut that because that's in my district. You can't cut that. So then you'd have programs like the Air Force would come and say, here's a $1 billion program that doesn't fight today's wars or tomorrow's wars, fights the last war. We don't need that. And then the congressmen and women would say, no, you can't do that. That supply chain's in my district. So then the military, by law, still had to cut, right? So then they would cut maintenance and training and readiness, and so the vital things in our military really suffer. So short term, and this is one of the reasons why I voted for the budget, which I'm happy to explain if someone has a question about it, because the greater good to me in it, while I didn't like all the spending, was getting the military back on track, short term. Long term, Congress has to make some pretty courageous decisions, just like our military do, to be able to get rid of the stuff that you actually don't need in the military. So that's on the military. Happy to go more in depth if people have questions. Let's shift over to the, before I go over to the military, because I'm on military construction, Veterans Affairs, on appropriations, Virginia got $300 million in military construction projects, which is a lot of money for our economy, but needed because you had backlog of maintenance and construction projects. 73% of that money, so a couple $100 million, is coming to Hampton Roads. We got a project for basically every single base. Again, not frivolous spending, things that were backlogged that needed to be done. So I'm proud that we were in that subcommittee trying to make that happen and bringing that stuff here, which was needed. On the veteran side, my first meeting was at the Hampton VA when I in Congress, And we saw that the Hampton VA was performing at a 1-star out of a 5-star level, which is unacceptable, obviously. And what the VA did to remedy that, they took the senior leadership and they just swapped them out somewhere else. So essentially, we took our problems and gave them to veterans somewhere else without any accountability whatsoever. So that was my first piece of legislation that I introduced, and I'm proud to say to you that the President has signed it. So we have our first law signed into law. It's a Veterans Accountability Bill that would deal with senior leadership there. And why that's important, because our district has more veterans. We have the fastest growing veteran population in the nation, women veterans, OAF, OEF veterans. We have more military veterans than any district in the nation as well. So that's very important. Also, in the Hampton, about 63% of the people who use the Hampton facility are from the south side. So for the veterans that are out there, we're already over capacity down here and in this area. And via the VA's own numbers, we will have a 40% increase in veterans over the next decade and a 60% more demand in care. And we're already over capacity. So on the south side here for outpatient center, you got two little small, some of you probably have been there before, you have Virginia Beach and Chesapeake, these small, what's called C-box outpatient centers. Congress authorized basically shutting them down and creating a new one. It's about 155,000 square feet. But as you can imagine, there are a lot of things up there, and if someone's not championing it and pushing it, it doesn't get done. You know, you think there's this, you think that surely somebody must be working on it, but there's a diffusion of responsibility. So our office has had the decision makers in our office probably no less than 5 or 6 times. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I had the GSA schedule and the VA in my office to push them to get that thing built. It's going to get built. It's going to get done. I think it's by, which is also ridiculous. We're trying to reduce the time, but it's like 2024 or something. But you'll see more on that either the end of this year or early next year. You'll see them come out and say, here's a competitive bid. And Virginia Beach and Chesapeake, they're most certainly going to try to bid for it. I don't really, while Virginia Beach is in my district, I just want to get the damn thing built, right? So, so we're working on that. A bunch of other veterans issues I'm happy to talk about. My office works on veterans issues all the time. We've closed 1,300 cases, I believe, individual cases, not just veterans, but also Social Security issues and disability and other things that help navigate the federal government. Economy, obviously the tax cuts were a big issue, and I know that there are people who like them and people who don't like them, but I believe that the greater good was doing it. And you can see what's going on in the economy. 8 or 9 out of 10 of workers in our district keeping more money in their pockets. They tell me, I'm out in the district, they talk about it. Investment-wise, you've seen, I've had employers send me a list. Century Concrete's one, for example, big one in this area, 400 employees, sends me a list of everything. They were incentivized to invest in the economy, to buy equipment. He also showed me the salaries of each of their employees and how they were, it's about right around $1,200 to $2,500 or so more in their pocket every year right now, and then they're going to have a lower tax rate. So in my opinion, you also have opportunity zones. So opportunity zones are going to spur investment, and they're going to use some of the capital gains that people don't want to pay the taxes now on, but they'll invest them in the economy, which will create jobs. So I know that that's a quick summarization of what's going on. There's plenty of other things as well. When you look at Chesapeake Bay money, I know that's important to everybody here. I understand that the president's budget zeroed it out, but I will tell you, while to be fair, every person on the Virginia delegation that I'm aware of anyway supported that, Democrat and Republicans. But the reality is, I'm on the Appropriations Committee, as is Dutch Rumpersberger, who's a guy from Maryland, and him and I, and he's a Democrat, and we work together with the chairman of Appropriations to get that money restored, the $73 million for the Chesapeake Bay, and it did. We got it restored. So we're able to do things like that. And I'm happy to talk about any other things you guys want to talk about. Social Security, before I turn it over for your questions, we're preparing a bill right now, and I know that I've seen some attacks which are completely BS. I've not voted to do anything with your Social Security or your Medicare or any of that stuff. It's complete BS. But what my office is doing actually right now is trying to create a lockbox of Social Security. So obviously Social Security is our money. I've been paying into it since I was 11 years old, working on a farm on the Eastern Shore. But previous Congresses have used that. So this would put a lockbox on our money so that Congresses couldn't use that Social Security for anything else. We're working on that right now, and we should be dropping that within a week or so. So I know I'm talking fast, but there's a lot to talk about. But I want to answer your questions. So who's got questions? I know you guys got something. You were the first one back there. That was very quick.
Do you have the support of the Senate on this lockbox?
I'm just in incubacy start, I'm just starting. It's in the,
Would you have support?
I'm sure I'll have some support. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we'll see if there's a support enough to get it passed. But I'm just starting to draft it right now.
Right.
So I will tell you that what I do with bills. So the guy that I beat had one bill passed in 16 years to rename the post office. It's not easy to get legislation passed. It's just not. Less than 2% of bills become law. Period. Now, some of the things that I can do on appropriations is a lot different. I can put language in appropriations that go through because it's funding the government. That bill's going to go through eventually, right? And so we've done that on a plethora of things that have benefited this district. One of them is in downtown Norfolk. Norfolk's been working for 6 years with the federal government trying to get 2 parking spaces so that in their downtown when they're trying to have the walkway between, I think it's the main and the water side and stuff like that, there's a customs building there. And then just trying to navigate with the federal government's been very difficult. We got it done in like a week and a half. So we were able to get that stuff done. The mayor's happy about it. He's very happy about it. So, but legislation-wise, the way that I do things, the way we try to do things, of course, is you can't just say, all right, I'm gonna have a bill, out, and then you have a press conference and say you have a bill, right? You can do that, of course, but that's not going to go anywhere. You have to be able to shepherd it through the process. You got to go over to the subcommittee in the House. You got to talk to the people who are the key folks that move that to get a hearing in the subcommittee. So when you think Virginia, the House of Delegates and the Senate in Virginia, when you have session, I think I have 10 laws in Virginia, I believe. That was easier because everything gets a hearing. You don't always get a hearing in subcommittees in the House. So you've got to find move the levers that get you the hearing. And you're not done, even close to being done there. You got to find a champion in the Senate who will actively work. And I know that we think that a lot of people do a lot of work up there, but that's not always true. And so you got to push the whole way through. And it took us a year to get that veterans bill done. But sometimes it takes years to get bills, and sometimes they won't get a hearing in years. So that's what we try to do with all the bills. Some more successful than others, of course, to get through. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, so the lockbox is something that's going to be way out there, possibly.
I hope it's quick. We'll see. But we're drafting it in a way that's palatable, that makes common sense. But sometimes things aren't so.
Because as seniors, we're concerned about our Social Security.
I understand that. I understand that for sure. Me too. Look, I will tell you that my generation has to worry about it more than you right now. Right? And I will tell you that if it's going to be there at the end of when I'm there, for example, we have to show some leadership and look at the program and figure out, hey, are we living longer? Do we need to raise the age? But that should not bother. That will not from my perspective, affect you guys whatsoever, right? You got to say that for my tracker over there. It will not affect the population right now. So thank you. Yeah, thanks. And you too. I guess you're tracking too. Yep.
The wind farm.
Wind farms.
What is your opinion of it?
If you can make them sustainable, self-sustainable, and economical, and people want them, Virginia Beach actually, as opposed to just about everywhere on the East Coast, has actually a plug-in. It's right near Dam Neck area, like a plug-in to the electrical grid. So if people are okay with them, it seems like everybody is until they're like going to see them. You know what I mean? And they're like, no, I can't see them. So I'm kind of all the above, energy-wise. If it makes sense, if it's economically feasible. We do have that plug in there, and so I don't know. I'm okay with it if it makes sense, right? I will tell you that I worked with Andy Harris, who has the Eastern Shore of Maryland, congressman there, because exactly Maryland's a little further ahead, I think, in putting the wind farms there. But again, all the folks that were advocating for wind farms didn't want to see them, right? So you had to push it a little further off the coast, which is what he put legislation in appropriations again. Works with me in appropriations, and I supported him in that, in doing that. So, we'll see. I guess you might talk about offshore drilling too. I imagine that's on somebody's mind too. So our area, while I think it's responsible to figure out what's out there, I think it's responsible for our country to take inventory of what we have. The shellfish industry, tourism industry, localities, everyone's opposed to it on this side. So I've come out as well opposed to it.
Right, because of the ship track.
And the military too. The military, that's obviously an issue too, that they can't advocate for what, I have a few connections in the military. So that's a big issue for us. So.
Any other questions? This is the time.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about election and campaign integrity. And so I was disappointed to hear the NPR story this morning about your staff collecting. They said more than half of the signatures.
Are you
were
disappointed about the
Rounds.
Democrat primary too? Because if you are disappointed about that, you should be equally as disappointed about that.
This was your staff collecting signatures for an opponent.
Not paid to do it. Look, there were people that were on, I assume that you support my opponent, and that's fine, cool. There were people that were on her opposite campaign too, who were unhappy with the rigging of the, not rigging, but the primary that also got signatures for Mrs. Brown. So look, if they want to volunteer to do that, that is everyone in here's right to do that, period. I'm not going to stifle somebody if they want to do it,
But
so.
if your
read
staff
they
is
were paid.
paid.
I didn't pay anybody to do it. No, I didn't pay, they're not paid
I
to
read that they
do
were
it.
paid.
Huh?
I read that they were paid.
Watch the headline, it will change. There's two headlines. One was right, one was wrong. And the one that was wrong was on the pilot online now, that will change. If it doesn't change, you'll hear a lot more from my campaign. So, we didn't pay anybody, they volunteered to do it. Yep.
We've talked about several issues that affect this area. We haven't addressed.
But you should, one second. You should also be concerned about the Democrat primary, where they delegitimized Karen Mallard and Sean Brown. And I think that's crazy that Washington Dems would meddle, more to your point, into elections here and not allow them to have a vote. I think that people should be outraged about that.
What do you mean
And they were.
legitimized? What are you talking about?
So they basically cut off all funding for them because the Washington Dems came down here, endorsed one person, picked their chosen person, which completely shuts the other two out. Like I know, I've been shut out before.
And you're
Yes,
concerned
she
about
did.
that?
Yes, she did. They absolutely did. Ask him. He's with the DCCC. Ask
And
him.
you're concerned about that?
Of course I'm concerned. You should be concerned about it. Everybody here should be concerned about it. Absolutely. Look, it's happened to me before running for campaigns. I think it's crazy that you would have an apparatus from somewhere else who doesn't know our issues come and pick a chosen person and put their weight behind there and basically usurp your support. So yeah, you should be concerned about that too. Yes, ma'am.
You've mentioned several issues that affect this area, but you haven't mentioned climate change.
Sure. I'm glad you put it on.
And your current administration has withdrawn from the Paris Accord.
Mhm.
I have not seen new policies, legislation to help prevent climate change. What I've seen is potential rollback of EPA emissions, no new legislation. And this area is particularly affected by it, as well as the country as a whole. It affects national security, it affects the economy, it affects health. And I think individual states are starting to tackle this as an issue. And I'd like to know what your position is and what you plan to do.
Sure. Thanks for asking that question. Like I said, there's so many things we're working on, it kind of gets lost. Look, in this area, so obviously we are number 2 in the country that's susceptible after Louisiana for sea level rise, basically, right? And yeah, there is debate. There's tremendous political debate, and look, people have very strong opinions about it, about how much man did, how much man can do. Hold on, let me finish. Let me finish, please. Do you want me to finish?
Well, I think that's a point right there, though. There's not scientific debate among the scientific community. It's a very well-established fact. It's like saying that cigarettes don't cause
Okay.
smoking.
Can I finish my answer for
Smoking
you?
doesn't cause
So you can hear what I'm. I mean, let me answer so you can hear what I'm doing about it, right? Unless you want to answer, that's fine.
Please answer.
So I believe in science too, right? And yeah, we have an issue in my own party that some folks don't believe in that. We have soundings right out here, right? From the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, there are 50-year-old soundings that say what? There's sea level rise. Norfolk, you guys have a dual problem. You got subsidence too. There's science in that, right? You're sinking and there's sea level rise. So there's a lot of recurrent flooding. Same thing in Virginia Beach. We have storm drains that aren't able to cope with the level of sea rising because they're outdated and old. So here's where I am with this. You got to do something about it, right? We have military bases here that are at risk. The military is doing something about it where they're able to on the base. So we have to come up with ways for resilience. There's going to be tremendous political debate, and I'm not here to debate that with you right now, about carbon tax and all that. There's going to be tons of debate about it. So what have I done? What have I done? I would submit to you more than anyone, and certainly in the Republican Party, and definitely in Virginia. So we have a bill out right now that's going to get a markup pretty soon that establishes a center of excellency for sea level rise. ODU, William & Mary, they're going to be great candidates to get that. Hopefully we actually work with them to do that. What does that do? That gets them, because they're established there, R&D money will flow there, and then hopefully economic activity, just like Norfolk started to do, or they were talking about it, where you create businesses out of resilience. So you're able to tackle the problems here, but you're also be able to export that around coast around our country, overseas. What else have I done? So one of the other things that I did on the appropriations, because legislation sometimes is slow and tough, is where we have our bases, which again, we talked about 40-some% of our economy or somewhere around, indirectly or directly from that. One of the big problems in Norfolk is the access road, right? So Norfolk, the Navy can do something if they need to with their piers and deal with sea level rise in that way, but they can't do it outside. So we put language in there that enable them to work with localities to actually spend money and partner to create resiliency. So while I'm not here to debate with you all that, and there's a lot of politics, there's a lot of political science that people don't talk about. Yeah, there's science and there's political science like that, and that's, whether we like it or not, that's the reality. So what I like to do is actually do things. So that's what I've done. And like I said, I'd submit to you, find me somebody in Virginia who's done more, please. Yes?
In the beginning, you said you have some association with Homeland Security and ICE and border.
We oversee their budget, yes.
Budget because of the appropriations.
Yes.
Well, I'd still like to ask you, what have you done or what will you do to help resolve the travesty of the separated children in Florida? I just saw that the administration told a federal judge last week that 1,445 of the 2,551 migrant children were reunited with their parents, but that means 1,106 children still were not reunited. And I know we get different figures, so we get different stories, but the stories are horrendous, heinous about treatment of these children in these facilities on cold floors, without blankets for everybody, bad spoiled food, sexual abuse. I mean, it's the embarrassment of our nation across the whole world. So what are you doing about that?
So that's a good question, and I think it's important to preface this statement with, much like a lot of things, there are layers of authorities, right?
Right.
That happens a lot of time, and I get it, and I'm happy that I'm the representative of this area, cool. But make no mistake about it, I can't just go, boom, oh, it's done, right? That's just not the way our system works. Yes, we can bring attention to it and hold people accountable for it, there's no question about that. And from what I understand, we've definitely done that. But it is important to say that there are laws. There are Flores consent decrees. And while this administration decided to actually enforce the laws, some of those laws are on the books, and when you mentioned a couple of things with the kids and where they were in temporary centers and the blankets they used, they had them under the last administration too. And now again, I'm not here to say whataboutism, but that's a fact, right? That's what happens. If there's a surge in there and there's not capacity to have people, they have to do that. That's what they have to do. Hold on 1 second. So, but when you look at some of the laws that do need to be changed, like the Flores consent, which we passed something in appropriations that dealt with that issue, because after 20 days, the courts ruled under the last administration, because to be fair, the Obama administration tried to keep them. They were trying to keep them together. They were, and then the courts ruled, no, you can't do it past 20. We know why things are being adjudicated. I think it's important to say, because I've also heard this. People are like, well, it's not illegal to seek asylum. Well, no, it's not. But it's illegal to cross this border illegally. There are asylum places that are the legal areas. And I would submit to you, I've spent years in South and Central America. I know the issues there. I've talked to people there. Like I said, I know the culture very, very well. If someone's paying money to come across the border, they know what they're doing. To think that they don't assume that they're stupid and they don't know that. That's crazy. Furthermore, so yes, I've also heard, well, when they go to the centers where they can seek asylum, well, they have to wait and they don't go through. Well, asylum, only a small percentage of people are able to go through asylum. But what I will tell you is, in appropriations, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to on the other side, and they're putting things in place because they're having a knee-jerk reaction to what's going on, instead of looking at the actual problem and trying to come up, okay, well, it's our laws. And some of the folks that I'm serving with, they made those laws. They voted for those laws. They've been there for a long time. They voted for those laws. So, but they were trying to put law, for example, there were two things that I posted on my Facebook. One of them was an amendment that said, okay, ICE, Border Patrol, you can detain no pregnant women. None. Does any woman in here have that right, if you do something illegally, to not be detained just because you're pregnant? No. No. I mean, that's not something that American citizens enjoy. Furthermore, then they said, okay, well, ICE, and I think it's dangerous to just demonize ICE. And they're like, okay, well, if there are sensitive areas that ICE can't detain people, like churches and stuff like that. But then they had this huge list of more, like bus stops and all, like crazy things. And then they said, not even 1,000 feet from any of those spots. To where the guy who was actually submitting it, which the other side voted for, his district, there's not one place in his whole district that people couldn't be detained if they had committed a crime. That's insane. So look, this political thing has gotten out of control, quite frankly, to where you have people going way over to this side. When we look, I agree with you, and I think it's horrible that families are being separated, 100%.
Yeah, I'd just like to add.
And we brought attention and oversight, which is our role. My role is, you know what I mean, and to try to adjust laws to ensure that that doesn't happen. And that's something that I think both sides care about that. I think both sides probably use it politically. That's not who I am, and I don't want to do that. But there are laws on our books that a lot of the people who were, you know, screaming about it actually put into, they signed into law, you know. So I'm worried about it just like you are.
Well, from what I have researched, it is also these laws, there have been lots of these laws on the books, but it's been up to each executive
Of discretion
to
of
decide
prosecution.
which ones to enforce and how. And this thing that's embarrassed us so much and made us look so shameful for the whole world is like the piece about all those people, like 450 or more of the parents who were just deported and not kept track of, and the kids are left here. We've got little, you know, the beautiful little child, the little 15-month-old or whatever.
Would you take your 15-year-old child through the desert like that?
I might if I was running from war or from drug lords that were trying to kill us.
that's right.
I sure
Good
might.
point. Good point. A good point. I think that's a good thing to say.
But I'm
And
just
that's
saying,
let me
they
say
didn't
that.
even plan for possible reunification, that's my big point.
I do think, to be fair, I don't think they understood what was going to happen. I get that, and I think they should be, you know, people should be held accountable for that. There's no
You
question.
say
But
that to your
yes, of course.
people
I have
up
statements,
there?
I have public statements about it. Absolutely, it would be ridiculous if I didn't, you know, say that. So. The same thing, but the same thing happened in the last administration, and like, this is not a whatabouts of what I'm telling you, but look it up. I just didn't have the attention because Bernie Sanders was on the Obama administration's butt, to give him praise, because of separation of families, because there was this huge unaccompanied minor issue. It's not. Look, I get it. I mean, there's a lot more attention on this president for those things. But and I would also tell you, I would caution you because, like I said, I've spent years in South Central America. It's not just war everywhere. That is not true. There are, if you like, there's this thing in African migrants. The French president actually said at one point, or Italian one, within one day when they said, all right, if there are handicapped folks on the boat, we're going to take them. Within one day, people are showing up all handicapped, but they weren't handicapped. People are not stupid. They're just not. I mean, this assumes that people are dumb. You know, there are people who are trafficking kids at the border. My first trip was to the border as a congressman to speak to Border Patrol. I'm not making excuses for this administration. I'm not. But it's not that simple. It's just not. I mean, the people make a lot of money trafficking kids and bringing families across here. A lot. And you can bet that if we make policies that enables them to take advantage of those things, they absolutely will. I would encourage every one of you guys to go down the border and check it out if you don't believe it. And talk to Border Patrol folks. Seriously. I mean, a lot of this stuff is very emotional, and I get it. And we should hold people accountable for wrongdoing, and we should adjust laws but some of this stuff has been happening for a while. But it's just getting now it's all emotional. Now everybody's going crazy and stuff.
Maybe not
Nobody
to
cared
this
back
degree.
then.
Is this volume, I
Except for
think,
Bernie.
is what
Bernie did.
everybody's
Yeah.
attention.
Last question. Yes, sir.
Withholding funds from sanctuary cities that have been appropriated, judge came down saying the president can't do that. It has to be Congress. You have to write it in the
Yep.
appropriation. It just came down today, so you got more work to do.
So I believe, I believe in the rule of law, man. I believe in the separation of the co-equal branches of government. I've railed against some things in the Obama administration. I would do the same thing with the Trump administration if they were trying to usurp that. I don't think that we should have sanctuary cities, just like I don't think that there should be law that gives people who aren't American citizens rights that you don't enjoy, or create safe zones where ICE can't get folks that have committed crimes. I think that is insane. So I think it's dangerous, and I care more about American citizens first, than allowing criminals to, not just criminals, but people who have broken the law to just run without. You guys, none of you guys have that right. None of you can go break the law and have to be, okay, I'm in a safe zone. The law officers are right there. They can't get me because I'm in a safe zone now. You can't do that. That's insane. I mean, you have to have rule of law. You just have to. We should never be demonizing people. Like I said, because of my time overseas, years in South and Central America, years in the Middle East, I know why people come here, and I don't blame them for it. They want to raise their kids and have a better life, and I get it, man. But my own son's mom is a legal immigrant. There's a process. There's a rule of law. If we want to change the system, well, let's work on changing the system, but let's not usurp it by not having the rule of law. So, all right, I know it's my last. Let's do one more. Let's see who's got one more. Yes, sir.
Can you address tariffs as a matter of economic policy, and maybe more importantly, where you stand on Congress taking back some of that tariff taxing authority?
Sure. Like I just said, we're a co-equal branch. I think the executive branch actually has too much power, and that's not just under this president or the last one or the last one. It's just grown. I think Congress has abdicated a lot of their responsibility over to the executive branch because it's easy and they don't have to make tough decisions. I think that's wrong. So yes, I would like to see that. In general, on tariffs. So I come from, I grew up working poor, man, working poor. And our, factory shut down, things went overseas, people didn't have jobs. There has been a trajectory with a transfer of wealth towards China that has been known, not just under this president, but the last one and the last one, but no one's really stood up to them. And I get it, man. With tariffs, it's kind of scary because you're like, somebody loses, somebody wins, stuff like that. But the reality is, and on even a broader, more macro view, China is benefiting very, very well with the transfer of wealth. And what are they doing with that money? They're building up their military. They're building up their hegemony there in that region. So we'll have to deal with that. So if you get that trajectory of military spending from China down a little bit, I'm happy. But at the same time, we have to be cognizant of how it does affect our folks. And any war, whether it's a hot one, a cold one, or whether it's a trade war, economic one, there are unintended consequences. Some people win, some people lose, there's sacrifices. I'm concerned about it. I'd be concerned about any war. Again, economic, cold, hot, I'd be concerned about anything. But I do think it is time for the United States to step up. And because we've transferred a lot of wealth, man, overseas. So, I'm cautiously optimistic that it will work out on our side. But I would rather see, so for example, the Canadian, we should be careful with our allies. There's no question about that. I don't like stylistically some of the things that happen with this administration. I've said that many, many times. I don't like demonizing our allies. I don't like that. But sometimes you have to have, as a family, tough conversations. Sometimes if people are, taking advantage, then you have to have tough conversations. And we have transferred a lot of our wealth, outside of this country, and I'd like to reverse that trajectory. But to answer your question, I'm happy to go offline with you and go deep, if you want. But all right, guys, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you hearing me out, and I appreciate you coming with tough questions. I like it. Period. I want you to know that my office is here for you. We have a fantastic team. They're not political. They don't care. They're just here to serve you guys. So if you have any issues with the government, navigating that, anything, Social Security, military, veteran stuff, disability, don't hesitate to call us. We're happy to help out. So thank you guys very much. God bless you. For those of you who don't know where the offices are, we have one in Town Center, Virginia Beach, right in Town Center. We got one on the Eastern Shore. We got one on the Peninsula in York County. That's the closest one, is right in Town Center. Okay.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.